Ever seen a street car with a fire suppression system and thought, is this guy expecting to combust spontaneously at a red light? Well, today we're diving into that exact scenario. Meet our customer's 2015 Ford Mustang GT, a beastly machine boasting a massive turbocharger, CO2 boost control, and drag radials that scream, I mean business. Yet, it's not a race car. No cage, no stripped interior, just a street legal monster that could give some track cars a run for their money. Now, some might argue, why install a fire suppression system in a street car? Isn't that overkill? Others might say, wouldn't a roll cage be a better investment? But here's the hot take. Roll cages without helmets can turn minor accidents into major head trauma scenarios. Plus, they compromise interior comfort and aesthetics. So before you dismiss this as another case of all show and no go, stick around and we'll show you why this modification isn't just for show-offs or track junkies. In this video, we're tackling the challenge of integrating a race-grade fire suppression system into a street car without compromising its daily drivability or interior aesthetics. Let's see how we pull it off. So you guys probably already understand that we're going to be talking about installing a fire suppression system, but maybe your eye is catching this shroud parachute back here, or these weld racing bead locks with drag radials. Or maybe you saw this little port right here and you're wondering what this car has that would require, that would necessitate any of that stuff. We've got a 5.0 Coyote, a turbocharger capable of a little over 1,000 horse, all of the cooling modifications, a line lock, the Boss intake manifold. There's a lot going on this thing. It actually has a tubular subframe as well. So this thing is pretty serious. And that's what the customer is looking to do, is to protect his investment and his life. So going to a fire suppression system before he goes to a cage actually makes perfect sense for him in this case. When people think fire suppression systems, their mind goes straight to race cars and sanctioning bodies with clipboards, telling you what you gotta have before you could risk your life on their pavement. But here's the reality. The fire doesn't care about your logbook. You don't need to be wearing a Nomex suit or chasing apexes at 130 miles an hour for your car to go full barbecue. Street cars catch fire too, especially the modified ones. You know, the kind with leaky fuel lines, hacked wiring harnesses, and enough heat under the hood to barbecue a brisket. Now, if you've ever smelled raw fuel and thought, it's probably fine, congratulations. You passed the first test for why a fire suppression system actually makes sense off the track. Now, roll cages are cool until they're not. Now, some folks argue that if you're really serious about safety, you should just cage the car. And sure, if you enjoy climbing into your vehicle like a UFC octagon, that works. But let's be honest, while a big safety addition when built to spec, cages in street cars are a huge compromise. They're heavy, they kill your rear seat, and if you're not wearing a helmet, that metal bar inches from your skull just became your worst case in a crash. Then on the flip side, a fire suppression system adds zero drama. It doesn't kill your creature comforts and it won't knock you out cold in a fender bender. It's just quietly waiting there in case your engine bay decides to turn into a flamethrower. And that's part of the win. We got this kit, ordered it up from Lifeline. And basically what we have here, this is the kit. It's actually fairly simple, all mechanical. And this is the bottle with the fire suppression element in there. And what these cables are, but these are essentially thermostats, a little glass tube inside of there, that once it heats up, once there's fire on that thing, it breaks and allows the suppression system to release via this tube. This tube, though, is dependent on where we put it. Ideally, the driver would probably want some on himself and maybe some on the engine. And that'll be the place where FMU's Fabrication comes into play, getting these lines to the areas that will be most affected by fire in a clean and functional manner. So this kit by Lifeline, not the priciest thing and some good peace of mind, but it's very basic in how it comes. We've got some brackets, 2 of them, for mounting the bottle to the floor. We did not get the cage mounts because this doesn't have a cage yet. And these are the bracket clamps. Now this is the pull cord for manually activating the bottle. This usually has to be somewhere the driver can reach. What else do we got in here? And basically just some lines and fittings in order to get us from this stainless steel tube here to the various outlets where we're gonna go, along with the nozzles at the end where the fire extinguisher chemical will come out, basically putting out the fire. So as you can see, it's a pretty simple system. There isn't much to it. It's mechanical. And we're gonna show you guys the thought process that goes into planning out the installation of one of these systems, as well as the work that's needed to actually get it in there. And let's be real, part of the appeal is that it looks like you know what you're doing. A clean install on a Lifeline Zero 360 system like the one we're putting in this Stang says, this guy doesn't just make noise, he builds with purpose. It's the same vibe as a custom exhaust or a tucked engine bay. Safety just became a style statement, and this one actually works. And if someone asks you what it is while you're popping your trunk at the next meet, you get to say it's a fire suppression system. Boom. Instantly more interesting than 90% of the bolt-on crowd. Now, the Lifeline Zero 360 10-pound SFI 17.1 is not just some budget fire extinguisher zip tied to the cage for tech inspection. The Zero 360 is the real deal. 10 pounds of SFI certified dual activation protection with both mechanical and automatic deployment. And that means something if you go sideways and you can't reach the handle, maybe you're a little preoccupied with escaping a fireball, the system's smart nozzles will pop off like a sprinkler system from hell. It uses 0FK, which is a clean suppressant, and that means no gooey residue, no electrical damage, and no aftermath that looks like a foam party that went off on top of your intake manifold. It's safe for your electronics, safe for your car, and most importantly, safe for your hide.
All right, so whenever you're trying to do fire suppression systems, you always want to look at the instructions, see what they recommend for placement, for installing, and then also it's always a good idea to check with for this one, it's going to be NHRA rulebook, to see if there's any restrictions, limits on where to put it. They're basically telling you that the bottle needs to be parallel with the axle. That way, when you launch, when you stop, the bottle's not going to go forward or backward and causing, issues. So that's the first thing that we're going to try and figure out on location-wise. As far as placement goes, there's no real designated area for this thing to be mounted. It can be in the trunk, it can be in the passenger seat, just as long as it holds that parallel with the axle, it should be all right. So we're going to kind of look around and see where we can fit this thing and then go from there. So figuring out where this bottle is going to go, there's only two real good spots for this thing to live. Conveniently enough, there's a boost control bottle in there already. That holds CO2, and that basically just regulates boost pressure whenever you want it. That's where this bottle would like to live. And conveniently, there's a shelf right above that bottle. I can just kind of flip the mounts upside down and mount it vertically up, make a little support bracket so it has no issues moving or anything like that. So that's probably where I'm going to end up mounting it. We have two thermostat, break off, so if this gets too hot, it's going to release the chemical and it's going to suppress the fire in that area for the fuel cell if this car had one, but putting it over the tank will be a good idea. And we have this longer side that'll just reach the driver's side area, and that way it'll suppress anything coming up further.
Now there's a real difficulty in actually performing this for a customer and properly estimating the time that's going to need to go into it. Now, most of these systems are designed for cars with roll cages, which makes mounting a lot more viable in those situations. However, when you're dealing with the full interior car, you kind of got to get creative, and the biggest limiting factor here is that these systems come pre-charged where you cannot open those lines. So until you have that bottle mounted, you have no way of knowing where those lines are going to end up until you start removing the panels and seeing how much distance you actually have to run those lines, and then seeing where you can tuck those lines behind. You can see how we really have to just dig in and hope that we can get to a conclusion and a clean installation very quickly, and along the way inform the customer so that way they can help us make choices on clean installation locations, such as the choice of nozzle placement within the specified areas of effectiveness, but activation, bottle mounting, et cetera, But you can see how very quickly something could easily ramp up if we're pulling the whole interior down and we didn't initially intend to pull the whole interior down. All right, part of the big trouble that we're having is that Typically on fire suppression systems, you have them in cars with full roll cages. Now, we don't just want to haphazardly put this anywhere, somewhere that the fire, if it actually got hot and dangerous for the driver, would actually affect. So our thoughts in that application would be somewhere higher up in the car. That's where the heat's going to travel over the driver, so it could sense the heat and activate the system. But because we don't have a cage to just mount it to, and we don't just want this big ugly wire essentially hanging down, we've got to get creative. But we can't really get too creative because we have a line that essentially came as shipped, sealed. And if we break anything other than this mounting nut, which is used to basically go onto a U-shaped bulkhead, it basically ruins the system. So we need to get this mounted somewhere that looks like it belongs in the car. This is difficult. We're not really coming up with any great ideas. We're thinking about running it from the A pillar along the B pillar, but there is a head protection airbag up here. So we have to be careful of that. We have to make sure you have enough line slack and have it come off in a place that will essentially work. We're going to have to really rack our brains on this, but what we'll end up probably doing is fabricating some sort of bracket that comes through the headliner, having a mount. It's just a matter of where we can mount it without bumping your head on it or having it be a horrible eyesore or something that gets in the way of it. So we're coming up with that now.
So we got to mount this guy somewhere in the center by the driver's head. That way it kind of suppresses the flames that way. We're going to end up going through the headboard, which isn't very rugged. We're going to have to build a bracket where this kind of goes through, and it's going to hold it in probably like a 20-degree angle, and then we're just going to lock it down with this nut, and it should hold.
All right, the system's in, and I want to go over exactly how this automatic and manual system works. We've got the bottle mounted up here, and if you look, we have a pull pin. Now, this pull pin activates the manual release, which I'll show you that in a second, but as you can see, this manual release here activates the propellant, which goes up to 3 areas, one the driver and the other 2 the engine. I already told you guys about the manual release, so if we've got anything happening in the back, this guy will heat up, break the bulb, and release propellant. And then this guy up here is the other bulb, which does the same thing except for inside the cabin, automatic activation if this bulb breaks. But this is where you have the manual system, which will activate the lines for the engine if you do have an engine fire. We've got one down here to spray a bit of the fire suppressant down into the footwell area. You don't want it up at the face. It takes oxygen away. So you definitely want it spraying up and out in this area. And then up here, we've got the 2 nozzles spraying to each side of the engine, mostly in the fuel area along the fuel rails and the fuel pressure regulators, because most of the fires are going to start in that area. Super simple system, manual, automatic, just that added layer of safety to keep you from burning to death if anything pops up. But the main part, if you're doing it in a street car, you're probably going to spend a little bit more time getting it to look nice. So why are we putting this into a Mustang GT that isn't a full-time track rat? Because pushing the limits doesn't mean you have to be reckless. A car can be streetable, comfortable, and still have serious safety measures in place. This is about being smart, not scared. And for those of you who have built cars that walk the line between street and track, this system makes all the kinds of sense. It's the adult version of carrying a condom in your wallet, not because you plan to use it, but because you'd rather not risk it if things get unexpectedly hot. Today we showed that integrating a Lifeline fire suppression system into a street-driven 2015 Mustang isn't just possible, it's smart. We preserved the interior comfort, retained full daily drivability, and added a serious safety layer that doesn't intrude or compromise the build. And while we love a good dyno pull as much as anyone, knowing there's a literal lifeline protecting your investment, that hits different, especially when you've got thousands tied up in a custom fab, electronics, or a one-off engine setup that didn't come easy. So yeah, race cars require them, but if you're building anything serious, the question isn't, should I? It's, why haven't I? Now go check those fittings, and while you're at it, maybe think about a Lifeline system, because tomorrow's wide open throttle pull might be the one. In the automotive world, we often chase horsepower and aesthetics and sometimes overlook safety. But true car enthusiasts know that protecting your investment and yourself is paramount. After all, what's the point of building a monster if it can be taken down by a simple engine fire? Got thoughts on fire suppression systems in streetcars? Think we're on to something, or have we lost the plot? Drop your comments below. We promise to read them unless they're about street glow. Until next time, stay loud, stay curious, and remember, it's better to have a fire suppression system and not need it than to need one and not have it.